And I also do things on my own channel, Otter Geekdom. We have several shows, but not really going to go into that because this is not about me. Though I will mention that one of our lovely panelists also created the system that I run both here on Real Women of Gaming and one of the systems that I run on Otter Geekdom. But we will get to that when we can. So we're just going to start off with going around the panel room and having all of our panelists introduce themselves. So I want you to tell us who you are, and we'll start off with what is your tabletop role-playing background, just so we have some idea of that. And why don't we start with you, Matt, since you're the first in my list.
Sure. Background as in playing or background as in writing?
Background as in playing first.
Gotcha. Yeah, so Matt Corley. I would say I believe the first time I ever played any role-playing game was a Red Box of D&D when I was in second grade. So about 37-ish years ago. So loved it, then stole it from my brother. My older brother bought it at a hobby store, brought it home, and then I read it. And that's how I actually learned math, probably, and also like Greek mythology and all that stuff. So started playing it then, played on and off through high school, which this was back in the early '90s when it was very hard to actually do that. You didn't. First off, it wasn't as popular. Second off, it was very hard to find people. No interwebs at the time, and finally got back into it about not even that, about 7 or 8 years ago after I actually ended up getting divorced and had more time and had friends and partner that was much more supportive of what I wanted, and so decided I'm going to start playing again. And so started playing again with D&D mostly, and then a few other games like Call of Cthulhu, some Pathfinder, just kind of the usual suspects. Or if I was at a con, I'd play anything I could get. Oh, I think you're on mute. Otter, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was saying, I stole my dad's red box, probably in
Oh,
like third or fourth grade myself.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I had
So that's
the expert book that was the green one that had the super old art. Oh, I wish I could remember his name right now, but I can't. But yeah, that was fun. Long time ago.
yep. Okay, Eric.
Hi, my name's Eric Swanson. I think my first RPG experience, at least a game with a game master sort of role, was Hero Quest, the board game, which was kind of like sort of like playing D&D, but in a board game setting for younger sort of intro players. But as far as actual RPG, probably D&D a little bit, but kind of as soon as I tried that, Shadowrun came into my life, and that was pretty much it. From then on, that into the Star Wars D6 RPG from West End Games, and then from there into World of Darkness, and then from there took a break for kind of a long time. Came back in with some other people that wanted to play D&D. They needed a game master, so I decided to be a glutton for punishment and do that. And then took a break for a little while after that. Then kind of came back into it with more of the indie stuff, like Dungeon World, Apocalypse World, and Torchbearer and things like that. And then, from then on, started getting more into the design and publishing part of it. So
Very nice. Okay, and then we'll go over to Conrad.
Yeah, hi, Corey Conrad. Friends call me Conrad. I'm one of the developers of Shattered. My play experience started in college, actually. We started with the Star Wars D20, We had a really cool idea where we actually did an alternate timeline where basically Luke and Leia died, and so like there had to be this whole new like fresh-faced rebellion sort of thing. But my team ran like the Imperial side, and it was really cool. Let's see. After that, we went into Saga Edition. I didn't actually get my hands on D&D until I had joined the military after college, and then I really didn't. I felt kind of cornered playing D&D and Pathfinder, and that was when I started discovering things like Dogs in the Vineyard, which is probably hands down like easily first or second top games for me all time. Other than that, I've really enjoyed running Only War, which is a discontinued tabletop RPG set in the Warhammer 40k universe that is built entirely around playing your own uniquely created regiment of Imperial Guardsmen, which is a total blast. You really get the sensation of being these tiny people in this galactic war. It's excellent. Can't recommend it highly enough. I hear Wrath and Glory does a pretty good job of that these days, so you should check that out if you haven't. I think that's the majority of my experiences. So I'm gonna pass it off.
And last but completely not least, we have, and forgive me if I mispronounce this, Ira.
Yeah, you got it.
Good.
So, hello everyone. I'm Ira Brand. I work with Conrad on Shattered. I've been playing in the tabletop space since I was in high school, like many of us at some point. I didn't start out with D&D. I started out playing Warhammer 40k on the tabletop when I was in high school. Discovered D&D shortly after that, at which point I succumbed to the satanic panic of my parents and was grounded for a month afterwards. But that only seemed to drive me further into the hobby, so played a lot of 3.5 and Pathfinder very early on. Then I moved to other games very quickly because I just wanted to like absorb myself in all of these different worlds and systems that were out there. So I've played the Dresden Files RPG, played all of the Warhammer 40k RPGs, some Call of Cthulhu, some World of Darkness, uh, Cult. Uh, the list goes on and on. I honestly can't think of all of them, but I've played dozens, and I'm always happy to find something new.
Even to the point of creating one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really didn't. I don't want to. This is the only time I'm going to go around the table and have you guys answer. This is really going to be more of a give and take discussion panel, more like a round table. So, what I want to know from all of you guys, all of you seem to have some varied experiences with tabletop, different systems, and so I want to know, what is it that pushed you to start creating something new? There's so much out there. You all have experience with a lot of different systems. Why did you want to create what you created? And I want to say, I may not have played all of your games, but I am familiar. In fact, I own all of your games. In fact, two of the people that are listening in, Matt, are two people I run in separate Whispers in the Dark campaigns. In fact, Lana's little locket picture, that's her character
Oh, that's cool. Very neat.
from one of the games that I run. That's her character, her investigator. So, so therefore, at least I know familiar with your work. So, who would like to go first? Tell me why it is you decided that you wanted to create something new.
I can start real fast. So when I guess probably the newest thing I did. So the game that I did by myself, or not by myself, but that I ended up publishing with a lot of help with a lot of people, was Whispers in the Dark. So it really came about because I actually wanted to play something that wasn't the high fantasy of D&D that all of my friends and players knew. We were in the middle of, we had a campaign that went about 2 years. We had two campaigns going at the same time. The one that I ran was very, very, very dark. Somewhat evil, like the players played evil characters, and I don't actually recommend that hardly ever, but for our group, it actually ended up working. It was great, and we all loved that atmosphere. Um, no one really wanted to learn a new system, even something as relatively straightforward as the D100s of basic role playing, so Call of Cthulhu. So my thought was, I'm going to take D&D, strip it of as much of the like kind of magic, the over the top, the superhero elements, and then do my best to drop it into a world or a setting that's similar to Call of Cthulhu. And the books and things that I like. And that's really what it is. I mean, if somebody said, what's the easiest way to think of it? It's D20, Call of Cthulhu, which of course I can't say that because my Mason's lawyers will be mad at me. And I think there's an attorney's the president there now, so we'll probably not say that too many times. But that's really what it is. I wanted to have something that could bring that style of play to the bazillion folks that know how to play D&D. And if you know how to play D&D, you can play Whispers with a character sheet and a GM that kind of knows the system. It's really all you need.
That's exactly how I describe it when people ask me about the system.
Yep. It's very, very straightforward.
Yep. And I did find it's one of the reasons why when I was looking I like horror, I wanted to do something Victorian, I started looking at a lot of systems, but I didn't want to learn a whole new system. And I came across Whispers in the Dark and went, that's it. That's the one that I want. So, who would like to go next?
I can hop in. I'll try to sum it up because it's actually a really long story. But I initially, with a few of the other guys on the team who helped me develop and Shattered and get it published, were working on a different project with someone else who, long story short, was not a very good leader and didn't really inspire a lot of confidence. And we wound up going separate ways and taking a lot of the material we'd written with us. And it was just, we'd spent, I don't know, like 6, 8 months developing systems and lore and characters and things like that. And we weren't going to let it go to waste. So we just picked up the pieces and decided on a name and a concept for the world and took right off. And it was just, Shattered was kind of born from not wanting to waste their work. And then we found Conrad sometime later and invited him on to help us edit some stuff.
I guess
Oh,
I guess that's me,
ahead.
right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it was going to be inevitable for me to end up creating something because I've just been making things, all sorts of things, just my whole life. Just starting as an artist, as an artistic, creative kid. Once I started getting into role-playing games, I started to do a lot of like redesigning character sheets and just being like really interested in the info design part of things, like the game components and those kind of elements. So I was always doing things like that, and as I played more games, I was always trying to create something of my own. Not very creatively, just sort of like kind of copying what was already existing. And then, years and years later, when the indie sort of thing kind of really started happening especially with Apocalypse World and then Forged in the Dark, Blades in the Dark, I really started to kind of work on a lot more stuff. And then I really got into a game called Torchbearer, and I met my current design partner through Games on Demand at PAX, which is a group of basically like volunteer game masters that will run games for people at conventions. So I met my partner Michael through there, and we were both into the same games. And he was working on some stuff, and I just decided that I was gonna, lay out all of his stuff. He had no choice in the matter. I was just gonna do it because that's just what I do. And started working on stuff for Torchbearer, and then Zine Quest came in 2019 I think was the first Zine Quest at Kickstarter, and we really wanted to do something. We were already getting ready to sort of publish something for like a third party thing for another game, and he said, well, I've got this thing kind of kicking around, take a look at it. And I took a look at it and I loved it, and we started really working together on that Goblinville was the first game that we published, and then we just kept working together. And I think it was the partnership that it didn't create the impetus for me to create something, but it helped to finish something, to bring something really, to really come together and actually finish something, publish it, put all the pieces together, and then present it. So I'm not sure if I'm really answering the question, but that's kind of that's the story of the first thing that that I then my partner and I published.
I think you have been answering the question. And it's something I've always been curious about. People, to let people know, Eric and I know each other outside of this. In fact, Eric was my partner with Equal Opportunity GeekCon, which we did before the pandemic and have not been able to do again. But we're hoping, and I'm hoping you'll still help me out with that.
Oh yeah, for sure. It'll be even better this time.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Considering we threw it together in, what was it, 3 months? And we came out in the black, so yay us.
All right, well, I'll wrap this up real quick.
All right.
There were 3 things that led me to developing. First is the D20. For all the great things it does, I didn't really like some of the elements, primarily the constant 5%. I absolutely failed or I absolutely succeeded, regardless of my actual aptitude as a character. That kind of irked me as soon as I first rolled the dice. The second thing for me is one of my big sticking points is mechanics as lore, or lore as mechanics, sorry. Make sure that the story and the pieces of your character actually all tell the same story. I think one of the most obvious things with D&D in that regard is things like spell slots. There are a lot of explanations, but just the actual nature, the function of spell slots doesn't really fit a story element in my mind. And then the third thing was a universe that's actually gritty and still has some of those fantastic elements. So you have Warhammer 40K, which is phenomenal. I love that universe, but there wasn't really one that did something similar in that fantasy setting. And so when Zip and those guys, Ira, shared the game with me and I play tested the first time, I immediately fell in love with the setting, and I knew that I wanted to help them. And so when they invited me on, it was a no-brainer, absolutely. And it was that easy for me.
Okay. Well, the reason I wanted to know about your, let's say, pedigree, your role-playing pedigree, is because I was curious if I was going to notice something that I did notice. Conrad and Ira, you did not start with D&D. You started with, Conrad, you said you started with Star Wars. Ira, you said you started with Warhammer. These are darker, these are grittier. And your game, Shattered, is dark and gritty. And then Matt and Eric, you started with D&D for the most part. No, you didn't. What did you start with? You're muted, Eric. Eric, you're muted.
Okay. Played D&D a couple times. I asked for Shadowrun for Christmas. I got the black D&D board game box, which was amazing thing. But playing it, I was like, okay. And then Shadowrun and the D6 Star Wars took me from there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Then sorry, I guess it wasn't as neat as I thought it was, with you both being in more of a fantasy-ish genre with your games. So okay, forget everything I just said.
Well, no, I
should have
think
been
I
should have
think
been
you are
quick
onto
though.
something though. I think you were onto something with what you were thinking.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you guys, all of you have created games. Eric, you've created more than one. Now you and Michael have 3 under your belt now.
3, yeah, and we're working on another something new and little bits and pieces of other stuff.
Very cool. Matt, is Whispers in the Dark the only thing that you've done so far?
So for myself, yes, I've got my book with Cobalt. I've done 3 adventure paths with Sandy Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
and then another 4. So working for yourself as a freelance RPG designer does not pay. Not that I do this for the pay anyway, but yeah, every once in a while I worked a lot with Sandy, which I learned a lot actually, and he's helped me out a lot getting publicity and stuff. So, but yeah, The Whispers in the Dark with a sequel scenario for it, and then also, of course, there is Horror in the Windy City, which was the source book for it. So
Yep,
that's the one I'm sticking to.
One of the groups that I'm running in Whispers in the Dark, we're actually running your scenarios, whereas the other one I'm running something different. But Thea the Bard, who's on here right now, she is one of the ones running your scenarios right now. So they just finished the first Crowman.
Oh, great! I have got to
scenario.
write the 3rd one. I've got to get that 3rd one done to then get the 4th one and be done.
Okay. But I guess my question is, if somebody and I have to say, Conrad and Ira, your book is beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's also the highest concept of the ones that we're talking about here. So Eric, you did Kickstarter, and Matt, I know you sell on Drive Through RPG.
Yep.
How are your team, the Shattered team, getting things out there, other than I know for a fact you go to cons and run games at cons, because that's how I met you.
Yeah, so we got our initial funding via Kickstarter just to help us pay for the rest of that gorgeous art that everyone loves. And then we've been selling mostly through Drive Through RPG, but also our own website, and I think Itch.io and a couple others. And anytime there's a RPG bundle, we throw ours in. So there's probably a dozen people that have, or hundreds of people who have our book, and they just don't know it yet.
Yeah, we like to be sneaky like that. We also sell hard copies on Amazon as well through Indie Press Revolution.
Yep.
Very nice, very nice. Yes, I bought a hardcover at FC3 when we met.
Yes, thank you again.
Yeah. No, I was in charge of their game room, so I sat there watching people play Shattered.
That was a wild weekend.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. So I guess my question, the question that I was leading up to, is somebody wants to start. Somebody has the idea. What would you recommend? What kind of advice would you give them? Other
Play
than
everything.
don't expect to get rich.
Play. I think the answers are pretty concrete. It's like play everything, talk to everyone in the community. When it comes to building, like I was saying earlier, lore is mechanics, mechanics is lore. Making sure that the way you play helps you tell the stories you want to tell. I think the best example of this is Dogs in the Vineyard. Super simple game. I think it's 50 pages long. You can get it for free online, and it's just 4 attributes for everyone and your gear, and that tells the entire story. And it's a beautiful example of mechanics as lore, where conflict escalates from simple, arguments to fistfights to gunfights in some occasions, and that whole give and take of knowing when to just cut your losses and run, or commit and say this is worth fighting for, is a beautiful thing. Other than that, knowing that if you decide to kickstart, if you decide to try and get it funded publicly, making sure that you have a product that you can present to people. That was one thing we fell short on. We didn't quite have enough of a product to really get the confidence people need to invest money in something as large as Shattered. And I think going forward, we will make sure we have more content, more art, more substance to provide to people so that they can actually look and kind of get a feel for what the game is going to be. Yeah.
Yep, we definitely kind of sold people more on the idea than anything else. And fortunately, we were successful, but most of the time, that's probably not going to be the case for most people. To add on to what Conrad said, I tend to lean on Stephen King's advice, which is to write for yourself first before you write for anybody else. So build something that you would want to play, and then go from there.
Eric, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah. I kind of forgot what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
I think like they were kind of saying, you do it for you probably want to make a game because there's something that you feel is missing in the things that you're playing. So it's probably coming from, something that you need. So I think what I would say is figure out if what you want to do, if the reason that you want to make a game, create a game is because maybe just you're not playing the right game for yourself. But if it does kind of come down to that you have a burning need to create this game, that you're thinking of, just start play testing immediately. Come up with the core of what you want the game to do. Think about what you want the game to do and what you want it to be about, because sometimes those two things aren't the same. And just start iterating and play testing immediately, or at least as soon as you can. Don't try to create an entire game. You never, use all of the rules of a game in a single session. So just figure out how things get done, what the characters are made up of, and how the dice work, or whatever your mechanics are, and just go from the center out, and build things as needed. Don't think about I'm publishing a game. Don't think about I'm creating a game. Just kind of see if there is a game first. See what the game needs. Kind of move organically through that. And I second, looking at, playing a lot of other things too, or at least reading different games, understanding RPG theory. There's a lot of weird sort of esoteric kind of, sometimes bullshit sort of things to think about considering, regarding RPGs, but sometimes what you're doing in a game is different than what you kind of think is even really happening. So kind of try to look under the hood, see what the game is, why you play it, what you want, why you want the things that you want, and just kind of go from there. It's kind of my approach is a little more touchy-feely, I guess. But yeah, kind of go from the center out and just go bit by bit. And I mean, I could talk about the Kickstarter part, the rest of the time, but yeah, just you gotta make sure that you've got something that you really care about, and that it's not just a clone of something. There's a lot of hacking that happens now, like with Powered by the Apocalypse, Forged in the Dark, like all these different systems that encourage people to make their own games out of existing rules. So that's cool on one hand, but don't just make a game just to make a game. Don't just make a game to try to publish a game, and make sure that your thing is doing something new, or filling, if not like filling a niche, just sort of like kind of coming up with a new angle on things. So that's my piece.
Yeah. I'll also agree that probably the one thing that helps, I think anyway, helps a lot is to read as many different games and play as many different games, including different editions of the games you're already playing. You'd be surprised at how little's new. Like Ghostbusters, the game is amazing. It has exploding dice and D6s before Savage World. There's stuff that was out there in the 80s that nobody read or nobody saw, or it's before the people that are playing now were even alive in some cases.
And Ghostbusters was the basis for the Star Wars D6 RPG.
Yep. Ghostbusters is amazing. I actually found a mint box and don't remember how much I paid. I know I paid too much for it, but it is sitting on my counter and waiting to get Sandy to sign it at some point, hopefully. But I think that's a huge deal. I think that there are a lot of mechanics out there because that's a big part of it that have already been done. And maybe they weren't done perfectly, or maybe they weren't done in a manner that supports the system or the story or the lore that you have. But it's a lot easier to adapt something that's 80% what you need, 90%, even 50% what you need. It's way easier to adapt it than it is to go from scratch. And whenever you adapt something, especially if it's something fairly reputable, we've already mentioned playtesting once. A lot of playtesting's actually already been done. If I'm building something completely from scratch with, a D12, D8, D10 system, something crazy, everything has to be built. But again, if you're doing a D20 or 100 or D6, it's a lot there that you really get. Just beg, borrow, adapt, steal, change it, credit everybody, of course. But that's really a great way to do it and save yourself a lot of work and a lot of heartache.
Yeah, definitely don't try to reinvent the wheel. There's no need.
Yeah, it's not needed. Somebody's got something out there, and there's so many wonderful independent Kickstarters and stuff too, and there's just everything. But I think probably the biggest thing that I learned the hard way was that no matter how good your game is, how wonderful your concept is, how much you love it, if you don't have eyes on it, you're not going to sell it. It doesn't matter. You can have a perfect game, and if 3 people see it, you might sell 1 or 0 or 2. So building your audience ahead of time in any way, shape, form that you can, any and all social media outlets are definitely a start. Newsletters, mailing lists, just anything, giving it to people to play for free or giving it to people to stream, everything. I think that's one of the ways that you can get that immediate audience and get a little bit of buyback, because as an independent creator, nobody knows you, or at least it's not likely that too many people know you ahead of time. So you're asking them to hand you whatever amount of money in the hopes that you might give them a book. And that's a lot of faith for a lot of folks, I think. And I know this is an extreme example as Matt Colville, but Matt Colville went from a YouTube show that's wonderful and 1,000 people to 50,000 people to however many he has now, and then he's like, I'll do a Kickstarter, and it was one of the biggest RPG Kickstarters ever at the time. And it's because he built his base. And again, I hope you all get it. I hope we all had that success, but that's really what it is having all those things ahead of time so they can see what you do, they can see you, and they can see all that ahead of time. I think that makes a big, big, big difference. That helps a lot, because if you just well, it's a great idea, it probably is, but we're not even getting a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the audience of a D&D or a Pathfinder or a Call of Cthulhu or something like that. So we've definitely got to grab whatever we can.
Yeah, it's kind of why one of the shows that my channel has in the works, we're not ready to run it yet, but it's it's called the RPG Test Kitchen, and we want people like you all who have a game that you want to get out and have people see, run a small, maybe 3-4 session campaign, so that not only, we don't have a huge audience, but we can put it on YouTube, and then you have something that you can show other people. Say, oh, you want to know what my game is? Here, we played it on this show. Go there and you can see what it's like, because as Eric knows, I'm a really big about independent, both TTRPG and board games. That was the whole the underlining concept of our con, was really getting out these, and we were very lucky to get several people who came. Unfortunately, the Shattered folks had another commitment, so couldn't join us, though I had reached out to them, but
yeah.
But hopefully next time. But
Absolutely.
that's the whole concept of it, was so that that people can have, okay, point 2, say, okay, here, go to this, watch this, this is how you play the game.
Yeah, I think amplifying voices is a big, big, big thing. You know, in a lot of different, well, in a huge amount of different ways. But it's interesting how there's still like it's me versus you or it's you versus them. Some creators do that, and I've never understood it because there's so many people out there. I mean, there are literally millions and millions, and I mean tens of millions of people play RPGs of the big folks. And I think anyone on this channel and anyone that's going to see this that wants to write a game would be happy with, like I mean, literally a hundredth of a percent of that body of that audience buying my game. I could consider stopping working. I mean, that's what I mean, because it's not like we're trying to make money, but again, it would be really nice to, like my first Kickstarter was Lamplight Sanitarium. It's a D&D. It's perfect for Ravenloft. Actually, it's a domain of dread that I didn't call a domain of dread at the time, although Don Foote does.
I'm gonna run it with whispers.
It's gonna. Yes. It's so. I need to rewrite it. Actually, I need to update it.
I kickstarted
I love that,
and that's why I got into you.
Yeah, and I lost money in that. Yeah, and I lost money on that. Well, I mean, I wrote it. It's fine. I think it cost me about. I didn't pay myself at all, and I think I lost $200. But eventually, it didn't. But again, it's like you said. It's impossible. It's very hard, and I think that's the thing is that we all just continue to kind of just retweet. That's really honestly, it's that simple. Like and retweet, or like and comment, or like and share, or whatever you do on your media. It's such a huge deal.
To follow up on that small loss, that small financial loss, like if you're out there trying to develop a tabletop RPG or an independent board game, you need to be prepared for setbacks too. Yep. Because they will happen. We had a whole print run come in that wasn't right, and the printer wasn't going to work with us to make it right. So we got left holding the bag and had to run a second print run to even fulfill our Kickstarter. So like that's a nightmare scenario, and you may be lucky and you may never run into something like that, but it will eventually show up somehow for everybody who's in this space. So you need to be prepared for that. And you need to be prepared for criticism, because like Conrad was talking earlier about some of his misgivings about the sort of D&D ethos and the D20 and things like that. There's lots of criticism out there, but there's lots of people that love the good parts of the D20 and how D&D works, and they're not open to other potential systems and things like that. And you need to be ready for very harsh criticism because, well, the second you put it out there, it's not yours anymore. And you need to find a way to take that with grace and try to, even from the worst and the harshest critics, try and find those little nuggets of insight that can help you for the next thing.
Right.
Yeah, pro tip, don't do physical prints through China.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ever going to do a physical print again. I don't know. It's so hard. It is so so incredibly hard.
With Print Ninja, we got a loan for that, and I mean, it was worth it also with Print Ninja. I wish we had just stayed local to begin with, but lesson learned.
We've done print for all of our games, and it was amazing until the pandemic stopped us going to cons. So we couldn't move copies, just kind of freely, just selling a few copies here and there, or if we had a booth, somewhere. But now, I mean, we sell through Exalted Funeral and our own site. But yeah, print copies, at least right now, it's tough. Or do like a smaller run for people that do want to have the hard copy. But yeah, but I think all this is putting the cart before the horse because you have to have something cool in the first place, and that's where your heart's got to be. You can't think about selling to even 50 people until you have your game done for you and your group and kind of put it out from there.
Yeah, it's passion before pay. As much as we'd all love to rub shoulders with Paizo and Games Workshop, it's not.
I don't want to rub shoulders with them.
The true indie perspective right there. It's us versus them.
Well, I mean, it's maybe not us versus them, but more like us with us.
Yeah.
Right.
When we publish Goblinville, and there are very visible, it kind of there are two very visible strands of DNA in the game, and the the two like people that made those strands of DNA saw our game and thought it was amazing, and loved it and supported us. Um, so if I can talk to the people that I'm inspired by, and they're supporting me back, that's the world that I want to be in. I don't want to see if I can shoot the moon, and try to like fight a huge battle to try to win. I would rather find people that want to come to the thing that I'm creating. Who think in a similar way. If I can change minds, awesome. I did that with my store, but like I tried too hard and I burned myself out and ended up, just saying, okay, like you
I
can
was
come to it on your own time.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to Jack from the Bahana group, who does therapeutic. They use tabletop games in a therapeutic way. They're doing several panels. They're doing a panel with me tomorrow for how to do consent in gaming from a therapeutic point of view. And I mentioned you, Eric. I mentioned Goblinville, and they've used your game therapeutically.
Oh, that's
And
that's
I'm
cool.
and
I,
I'm
I
like,
was I wasn't expecting you were going to say that.
and I'm like, oh, I got to remember to tell Eric that. He will just absolutely be thrilled that
Well, that's
somebody,
great.
yeah,
That's
they've
great.
used it. They love your little game and they think it's wonderful.
That's
So
awesome.
They are a fantastic group. I cannot
they really are.
say enough about them. And one of our fellow indie developers who was inspired from what we did is actually a huge supporter of them, and that's how we got in touch with them eventually as well. So they're awesome.
Yeah, they're amazing people. So yeah.
I
Can
think
I
that
ask Eric what the DNA strands? Are you comfortable with?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Michael and I love, well, the Burning Wheel realm of games, Torchbearer especially. So we took a lot of the inventory, like the very like rigid inventory system, with the dice mechanics and resolution from it's like a small little system called it's like a micro system that was made by Vincent Baker, who did Apocalypse World, called Other Kind, where you're rolling for um, you're rolling for two separate outcomes at once. Like whether your action succeeds or fails, um, like and at the same time whether a danger, an associated danger comes to pass or doesn't. And the player gets to decide based on the dice rolls, the dice results. They get to assign, whether those two things, pass or come to pass, or or a combination of both. Um, so yeah, so those are the two main things in our game, and
Nice.
yeah, and luckily the people that created them, they're like, go forth and use these things and make a game that's better than what we've already made. So yeah.
Very nice.
yeah, I think some
I
other
seem to have
things
cut you
for
off, Matt.
oh yeah, I was just saying, I think some other things for like anybody that wants to get into, especially if you do want to try to make even any kind of run, is kind of to remember again. I learned this the hard way, and I had a couple people be very very nice to me for things that and help me with mistakes I didn't even know I had made. Was like if you want to get on to get interviews, like you want to talk to Ian World or you want to talk on a podcast. Most podcasts are scheduling out 6 months. It's not unusual. So if you want to podcast, if you're going to do a Kickstarter next year, now it's not too early to try to get your name out there for podcasts and whatnot, and to get advertising. And that's the best kind of advertising you're going to get, is to go to those places and have them talk to you. And like something I mentioned earlier was have something that they can see too. I love that Russ Morrissey has made an art form of Kickstarters. He starts it on Monday or Tuesday. It's always Tuesdays, I think. Finishes it 2 weeks later. Wednesday morning after that, the day after it's done, you have your book. It's finished because he doesn't do a Kickstarter without his products being finished and ready to go. Now he had to put a lot of work to get in there, But every Kickstarter is bigger and bigger and better and better because there's zero chance that Russ will not get you a book. I mean, it's zero because he's got such a good reputation. He's done it so much. And I think that, again, that's your hardest thing with your first Kickstarter. And I think I've now done 3 that I've run on my own. And as many things as I went through with mine, which I think if, Otter might remember at least some of them, the pandemic was one. My daughter got cancer in one, and she's doing great. But like all sorts of stuff happened. And all of a sudden I got work from work, but also freelance work. But every time I made sure that this was also something I took seriously, and I got my stuff finished on time every single time. And I think that's why each one got a little bit better. I do think that makes a big difference is have something ready, like you said. If you'll be a jack of all trades. I mean, I'll be honest, the artwork in mine, I think it fits for the genre, but it's not going to win an award, and I'm okay with that. Like the artwork I pay for will, but the artwork I do for it, probably not. But again, you have to kind of be able to do your own editing, your own layout, your own, really as much as you can. Editing, pay for somebody to do your editing, or find a very good friend that can do it for you. If you don't, a poorly edited book, you won't get somebody past your second or third page, no matter how good it is.
I actually have something on that note too. I sometimes struggle with that, like people do judge a book by its cover.
Yep.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, and I do too, which makes me feel bad and makes me feel kind of like a snob when like I pick up a book, the cover looks cool, the premise sounds amazing. I did this at PAX Unplugged this year. Picked up this game. This sounds really awesome. It's like Eldritch magic, like during like World War I. Like that sounds so fucking cool. Like let's do it. And I start looking through the book, and it just like it does not look good.
Yeah.
It's not laid out well. I don't remember the art. Art doesn't totally matter, but the way that the content was presented, I was like, I can't picture myself using this book. And it's kind of not, it just doesn't look great. So I was like, and I just put it back. And I felt really bad because this game could have been like the best game ever. Like it could have been like the coolest. It might be my favorite game, but I put it down because the presentation wasn't great. So, if your game is awesome and if you're really passionate about your game, make sure that like the passion comes through the visual part of it too.
100%.
Layout is
like for me,
fantastic call out.
Yep, layout, and the info design. Well, that's usually like the thing that my brain goes to when we're creating things. How can this? Because you have to use the book as well, the book and the sheets and the materials and stuff like that enhances the game. So if it looks like crap, or if it doesn't help you at all, like how can you play? How can you play that game? So I
know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly. On a much smaller scale, I am a big fan of using modules as a jumping off point, and I buy a lot of indie modules off of Drive-Thru RPG. I just really enjoy doing it, and I ran one the other day because I just needed a quick one shot, and I spent more time looking for the information that I needed because the layout just didn't make any sense. It made no sense what certain piece of information, and I knew I read it somewhere, but I wanted to give because it was a table, and then I couldn't find the table, and it was not laid out well. And I will probably never buy another module from this creator, even though I love the concept of it.
Yeah. It sucks, but it's also like something that's really important.
Yeah.
Well, it goes with treating it like a job and being professional in your presentation. And I mean, I hate to say it like that, but that's kind of what it is. And I've had books that I've loved that are white paper, black typeset, Times New Roman. Like I'm not even going to read it. I mean, probably. But the other thing is you can do that's where you can learn a lot from other creators. A lot of people do a lot of different things, and you can see what works and what doesn't from any system. It doesn't matter what the system is. You can see the layout. I also ended up using her name's Laura, and I can't remember her last name. It's on one of my books. I paid a couple $100, which is really nothing when you're talking about setting out an actual like 300-page hardback. And she created a Word doc template that does all of it. And I make everything in Word, and I use styles in Word, and it looks fantastic, and I can actually see it, and I can see what it looks like on a nice big monitor with a 2, 3, 4, 5 page spread. Because that's one way, again, like that. I can't overstress. Like, I think that's a great point. Typeset and organization is so incredibly important. And honestly, it's cheap for us to do. It's time is really what it is. It's not me spending, $500 on a cover or $300 on a piece of interior art or whatever I have to spend on whatever. And I think the other thing you mentioned, the cover, something that I've done a lot, and I've ended up getting folks from like genre fiction that make wonderful covers, and they make them pretty cheap in most cases. These are people that it's really a lot of photo editing. Some folks do things that are pre-made, and you can just go look. And I mean, I've found covers on what's his name, Don Noble, I think, and Don does one, and my other cover guy, Rooster Republic, and they do horror covers. And I've looked at their pre-made covers. It's like $100, and I can read a cover and like I can write a story to that of one piece. And I've got a cover that looks amazing, and we all know that. I mean, I've seen people you can spend as much money as you want on a cover. You can put as many commas and zeros on it as you want, and it's not going to matter. Like Whispers in the Dark, that cover, again, Rooster did that for me, and that's completely custom. But I think it was maybe $200, and that cover stands out, like super stands out. Like I can share if anybody wants. I'm like loves that cover, like.
Yeah, that's when you have to know what your strengths are and what the strengths of other people on your team are. Knowing what you can, like I can do layout, and I can, I'm an illustrator, so I can do those things, and I know that it looks okay. Not just because I have a big ego, but like other people approve. But if you know that you or no one on your team can really do that, or can produce art of the standard that you want, definitely put funds towards that, towards those things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like Matt
I
was
know
saying.
that. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Well, and playing to the visual aspect, right? We've had, on the flip side of that coin, we've had dozens of people tell us, "Hey, this looks amazing. We love your art. Is it a video game?" And no, it's not a video game. It's a TTRPG. But the art led them to believe, like, this is concept art for a game that's going to come out, a video game. On the same hand, we've had dozens of people be like, "I'm not going to play your game." And we go, "Well, that sucks." And they go, "But I'm going to buy your book, and I'm going to put it on my coffee table because it's absolutely gorgeous." And I'm like, yeah, go for it, right? And
Okay. Yeah. No.
yeah,
Not
like if
gonna
that's how
complain
you
about that.
feel, right? I have the book right here. If I can flip this around real quick, maybe there it is. Yeah, so this is our cover art here, and I mean,
Oh, that's
just
awesome.
we committed some of this
It's a
art, but
beautiful
yeah,
book. It really is.
like what you were
A
saying
lot
with
of money.
layout, like yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
the layout was all Ira. She did a wonderful job, but like
Yep.
we invested thousands of dollars making sure that we had a setting that really stood out. And we grabbed people's attention.
Yep. Well, we are actually completely out of time. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. And if all of you would send me the most appropriate links to your products, I'll put them on the Otter Geekdom table. So if anybody who's stopped in wants to take a look at your stuff and possibly buy your systems to run themselves, would be thrilled to host that since I don't sell anything. So send me links. You can just DM me links and I will put them, and maybe you guys can, or you people could get some nice, at least a couple sales, because conventions are few, in-person conventions are few and far between.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
Sounds
the
good.
invite.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you
Great
so much
conversation.
for all of you for coming, and for the people who listened, and have a really wonderful time. And I hope you'll stick around the convention and check out some of the other stuff. And coming up next, we've got, I know it's an indie RPG, indie video game. Oh my God, I can't believe I don't, with all the stuff that I've been doing, that I can't remember the name of it.
We're doing this panel
Thank
again, so
you.
guys, get
We're doing
ready.
it
This was the
again.
practice run.
We're going to
Practice
talk
run.
about
That's
Kickstarters.
home. It's
Yeah.
a
All right. Now that we have our repartee all figured out, let's do it.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, and everyone have a really good night. And don't forget
Thank
to
Nice
you.
to
send me
meet
your link.
everybody.
You too.
Thanks. Nice
Bye.
to meet you.
Good luck with your projects, everyone.